This is Pete.
Hi Pete, this is the Kimberly-Clark Help Desk. We have a machine down event. Are you able to join the team's call and verify the severity of the incident?
Now I can imagine that some of you have been in that situation before where you're called on to recover some sort of system. For me, that occurs monthly. We have over 1,000 process lines that we're responsible for supporting in our facilities, and any technology can fail. So what could play out over the next hours of that telephone call could be hours, could be days, could be longer. Depends on the severity of the failure. So the question that I ask is, are you confident or uncomfortable in your ability to recover from whatever may come? So a little bit about Kimberly-Clark. We recently celebrated our 150th anniversary, so we've been around a long time. We make products that serve billions of people a day. Every day, billions touch our products. If you've been out in the hotel, you've probably used our products. Those product names are names like Huggies, Cottonelle, Kleenex, Depend, Pull-Ups, Good Nights, You by Kotex, Scott, among many others. And the reason why those brands are important is because our reputation and protecting those brands is our bread and butter. We make money off of those brands. We have to make money. So that's why we exist. So in 2017, we performed an internal audit of our systems and looked at our industrial control space. And we were trying to find out where that risk existed against some of those products. And to the teams that support our OT space, the findings weren't going to be too shocking, but we had findings. Our people, the people processes that we have, were inadequate. We weren't maintaining, we weren't following our own internal processes. So we had challenges with why we didn't do that. We don't have visibility to the pieces of our OT space, so we didn't have the visibility to all the components that exist in that space. So we couldn't quantify risk. So we built a program to help us solve that. On the flip side of that, in our IT space, we have a very, very well-controlled environment. Our IT folks have focused on disaster recovery processes for years. Have to recover data centers, have to recover mainframes. How to do that? Well, they practice that. They practice it annually, so that, and through that practice, through that effort, processes were generated. And so that program that we launched kind of was bringing us along the journey to improve. How do we continuously improve and make things better? For this idea, for this talk, I originally proposed it last year, but COVID got in the way. Our travel budgets were cut. We couldn't travel during that. It was too risky. So Kimberly-Clark is a risk-averse organization. So those of you that were here last year, great. For us that couldn't attend, there's reasons why. And one of the genesis for this talk is related to my previous attendance at S4 and listening to all the products and recommendations that come about, and trying to integrate those into our environment and take advantage of all the knowledge here. And I felt like there are some gaps because our experiences don't necessarily align with reality. The challenges that we have in our spaces to deliver on all these ideas have organizational, financial, and practical limitations. So this word cloud, I built this cloud based upon the terms that I used repeatedly with my customers, the people that we needed to work with to say, how do we improve? And a lot of the words relate to availability, systems, technologies. But the things that come about, or the things that really surface to the top, are really the people, the knowledge that those people have, the processes that we use, and the data that we need to consume to be able to recover our systems. So without those people, without those processes, without the data and knowledge, we would not be able to recover from whatever instance may be there. Back to that phone call. Recovery doesn't just occur. It requires a lot of planning. It requires the right people. It requires systems and expertise. It requires that practice. So people that are in the OT space typically don't have that process. They're not exposed to that process. The IT teams are. So we tried to take advantage of our IT knowledge and apply it into OT space, take advantage of those things that are there. And really bringing those right people together was a challenge for us. So some people had some questions. I looked at some of the questions and people were focused on, well, could we use this technology or that technology to help us with recovery? And I think we have very good component recovery plans. We have very good application recovery plans. But when it comes to the people process, how do you do that? That's where the challenges begin. It's not a discipline that the OT teams typically take on. The people that are operating our machines essentially do that every day, but it's not a process. They're constantly trying to keep the machine running, and so they have failures. They have to repair things. But when it comes to a system-wide or a site-wide or enterprise-wide type of event, that's not something that the business has really thought about. We have to build those processes. So if we were to think about, if I were to focus on a small problem, machine down, I have to know, I have to be able to look at that process, I have to be able to listen to the people and understand what that is. And I have to bring the right people to the table to get that. And so as you think about communications, when you have outages, there's a lot of people that want to know what's happening. They want to know why something failed. They want to know when it's going to be returned to service. And you may have even further, you may need to recover a whole facility. Let's say a facility was down. Let's say there's a security vulnerability that's been exploited and now you can't trust your whole environment. You have to shut it down. What if there's a legal implication of that? You may need to communicate with your external communication partners to say, hey, maybe there's a news event. So you have to have plans in place. You have to think about that before your disaster or your failures occur. So we have, within a process we call our critical outage process, we have dedicated people who are there for communication. So people in the technology space, the technical resources can focus on recovering or learning what the source of the problem is. So some of the things I think about, because I've participated in a number of power down events at facilities, and in some of those power downs, our network team likes to perform activities of maintenance. In the last power down I was in, the core network was down, and the team couldn't bring it back up. The switches were down, core switches, so there's no communication at the site. And they were trying to reach out to their support teams offshore. And the problem is they couldn't because we rely upon a telephone system that's in the cloud. So now I have no means to communicate. And the cell phone service in the facility was inadequate. You could not communicate from that data center room. And oh, by the way, we ripped out PBXs 5 years earlier. So you have to think about what are you going to do in those situations? How are you going to handle that? Do you have a plan? The data and the operational signals that come with thinking about this is a challenge. So you have a lot of data that's there. The people that are going to participate in this process, do they have access to that data? Or is that restricted to only the people that need to know? Oftentimes that's going to impact your ability to recover. So we did not have all of the signals in place when we did this audit for our teams, and we still struggle with exposing our logs to the people that need them. We have internal control processes that say, I need to have segregation of duty, and you don't need to know that. And that's a challenge in and of itself, but certainly from a recovery perspective. So we've been focused in our process of learning and failing a bit, or practicing this on smaller scale attempts. We started focusing on systems to put in place. And some of those systems we put in place were for discovery. How do we discover all of our control components? How do we get those and expose them and make them visible? How do we log interesting events? What are those interesting events? Who are the people that know what those events mean? Do you have a tool to do so? How do you put this into a corporate system so that you can have a configuration management database? How do you track it? A lot of the OT systems are not in our corporate CMDB. They're not there, so do they exist? So when we think about this, how do we get these people into this process? We're challenged in that place. We needed, in our process of trying to get some of those tools in place, we needed to cultivate some people, some roles in our organization. And we landed on this concept of an OT champion, so the people in the plant who are knowledgeable about the processes that run machines, that are knowledgeable about the machinery, and have exposure to the technology but may not be there. They're the folks that are the most valuable in this process because their feedback to recovery is critical. You have core people who understand all of the systems, the people that are experts in networks and firewalls and applications in the control space itself. Then you have all the support organizations that are there. They have challenges. They don't have the language, but you have to have them there to be able to operate and recover systems. And in a recovery, you may need additional resources. You may have people from outside your organization that need to come and help recover. You might have a vendor that needs to travel. Do you have the budget? Are you ready to pay for that? And then we have recovery process experts, those folks who are offloading the work of communicating what's happening with that recovery and allowing the tech people to focus on getting systems back and working. So we have a lot of process knowledge. We have a lot of system knowledge. It's buried down at the bottom layer. It's buried down in those plants. It's not brought into the center of our organization. It's certainly not in the IT space. I sit in a group that's in between there. I sit between IT and the engineering community in a unique space. And so the challenges that we have is that we've got all these roles, and we need to have that knowledge and bring that knowledge together. And so you talk about convergence of IT and OT. In my perspective, that's a one-way street. IT folks are not learning the OT space. It's vice versa. OT folks are only learning the IT. And that doesn't help because there's real technical language gaps between the organizations. So when somebody says, hey, my machine is down, the IT folks thinks that's a PC or a computer. And it doesn't get the urgency that's needed on the desk, on the help desk. They set it as a low priority, and it's like, well, wait, we have a problem, we gotta get it fixed. And so recovery is probably not the time when you're trying to recover. That's not the time to be fighting with people and trying to communicate what's there. You have to start building the language between organizations. And so what we've done is we've built this group that we call the OT Support Center, which gathers a lot of these skill sets together to begin breaking down those language barriers so that when you have a critical event, you're able to communicate effectively. One of the common themes or the things that a lot of the tool vendors will talk about is, hey, I got a baseline for you. I need to get your baseline. Tell me what your baseline behavior is. We don't have the time to build baselines. We barely have enough time to get the system running to be able to document it. Well, our documentation is on a spreadsheet and a CAD drawing. It's not automated today. We're working on it, but it's not there. So the challenge with that is we don't have the resources. We didn't have the resources to do the things that we really need help with. And it's a struggle to get the leadership to buy into that because we're a financially driven organization. We're meant to make profit, not necessarily put security tools in place. And so the projects that get brought forth have to compete against capital projects to make a product improvement. So the money doesn't necessarily get put forth to put in security systems. And so we have a lot of operational signals that we're starting to build, and those operational signals really need to have people who know what those signals mean. So the challenge of these operational signals is they're manual. We need help with automating things. We need help to offload that work so we can return time to the people who use those tools so they can be better affecting change and improving the security. A lot of the things that people will look at when we do get into recovery processes, people don't focus on the data. They don't look at their log data and actually listen to it. That's one of the things I think over and over again. The data is telling you something, use it and learn from it, make sense of it so that your teams can move on. But oftentimes our security groups are looking at and say, here, let's collect everything, let's put it in a data lake. It's like, well, I don't want everything. I want the things that are important. How do you filter down to that data? You have to get to that point. You have to have people who know the data so that you can trust it, so that you can build upon that and make useful information. And you have to rely upon the people. So those people closest to the process, they're the folks that know what's happening. They're the ones that have feedback to say, hey, this is broken, this is not normal. We don't have those technical baselines to say, hey, something's abnormal. The abnormality for us is the machine is running, it's running good, or it's not running. And when it's not running, that's not good. So some of the things that I feel important that we need help with, or that we've run into, and I think the S4 community can help with, we have problems with the data and defining when we do this automatic discovery, and you start to put things into place and you say, hey, I discovered this pile of stuff. What does it align to? What context does it belong to machine 1, machine 2, or machine 5? Is it shared? Is it dedicated? What firmware version does it have? What is it? Is it a PLC? Is it an I/O point? Is it a server? Is it a virtual? Is it a physical? There's not a language to be able to take that data and say, now that we discovered it, inject it into a configuration management database. There's no structure in place that allows us to do that easily. So we had to build custom capabilities in our CMDB. Our baselining and being able to get there, a lot of vendors here can learn, put their systems in learning mode. But then there's thousands and thousands of flows that have to be analyzed. In the past, we had the expectation that somebody was going to sit down in front of that tool and validate that. We don't have the luxury of time to do that. We don't have the people to do that. So the challenge we have is we need more help with automation. We need to be able to get and offload the manual effort from people so that they can focus on the value and they can return things to operations. And so you look at this and you see this. I could focus on so many different pieces of technology and talk about how I recover that or how I prepare for that, but it's the people processes that the OT space does not have the luxury of working with and aligning to the IT folks. It's typically been, hey, you're over there, I'm over here, this is your job, that's my job. We don't talk. So that's the end of my slides. There's some room for questions if you guys have questions. Microphones on either side.
How you doing? Thank you for your talk. So you brought up the idea of having folks kind of converging between your security/IT and your controls engineers, perhaps the actual process engineers, be it electrical or whatever. Do you have any suggestions or like a baseline, a guidance that you would provide to anybody for how you get those people in the same room, or you kind of identify who should be an ambassador for each group and what kind of challenges they should sit down to actually discuss?
Our experience was that we needed those people at the site to be able to help put context into the tools that we're using to discover gear. This program that got launched for us was launched without the planning for resources in the engineering community. So it was IT security led and driven, and a program was launched. We didn't plan for the resource time for those people, so we were not 100% successful. We have a staff-driven organization. A number of our businesses are staff-driven, so we have people in the center who allowed us to do that. And we built a core around those people, and then we reached out to the people at the edge to say, hey, there's value to you in your role to help us and do this and use automated tools instead of using those manual processes. So that was our approach to say, how do we get people at the edge to participate? And we've seen in the few places where we've had people really dive into that, they've been extremely successful in accelerating the automation and the usage of digital tool sets to do that. So we had to get, it really is a cross-functional, and it's dependent upon your organization and how you're structured. We struggled with that, but we're seeing the wins now. We're seeing the value because of the tools are providing the value back to their role.
Excellent, thank you. I just encourage anybody that is trying to do that effort to make it known, whether you have a blog or a posting you put on your website. The more we can do that, the better it is to get these things done. So I like that you're working on that.
Thank you. All right, thank you.